Last week, I was doing a live draft where I had somebody ask me about the double hero running back strategy and if we should be utilizing this strategy in 2024 fantasy football. And in that live stream, I was saying there's years of data over the past several years in particular that have shown that the double hero running back strategy, particularly in a best ball format, is an outdated strategy. And honestly, I think it's a little bit absurd that we should think that that is the strategy we need to use in 2024 fantasy football. So I'm going to run through the reasons why. We're going to walk through exactly the data that backs this claim up that I'm making right now, and what strategy we might be better off using other than the double hero. So first, go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So what I did here was I went to rotoviz.com. And what you can do on RotoViz, you can go to an underdog best ball roster construction explorer. Now, this data ranges from 2021 to 2023. So that's the past 3 seasons here in particular that we're looking at this. And like I said, it's particularly noteworthy to identify the last 3 seasons because I believe that there's an explainable reason why the double hero RB strategy is changing in a bad way. And of course, the big thing that we have to identify here with the double hero strategy in a best ball format on underdog, it's already at a disadvantage because there's a 3 wide receiver. That's how many wide receivers you have starting for you on a weekly basis in a best ball format. So wide receivers are automatically just higher value than a running back is in best ball in particular. So what I did here is what I first wanted to show you guys is that anytime you join a best ball league, you're in a 12-team league, right? There's 2 teams that can advance to the playoffs out of the 12-team league. So everybody automatically starts out with a 16.7% chance to make the playoffs. That's before they've even drafted anybody. Everybody automatically has just a 16.7% chance. So obviously, what we want to do, we want to see that number go up rather than down as we continue drafting here. But what's really interesting about doing a double hero running back strategy is the more running backs you draft in the early rounds, the lower those chances get. Now, of course, we have to identify a double hero running back strategy is where you take 2 running backs within the first 3 rounds of your draft right here. So again, you're punting on wide receivers, which is going much faster than running backs are in a best ball format right here. And as you can see, if you go with a running back 1 in round 1 here, your chances drop a full percentage down to 15.3% to make the playoffs. Now, that's not like, it's not like that's changing you in a massively drastic way to where it's like you have 0% chance now. Obviously, if you hit on the right running back, you're going to be able to proceed. If you hit on a Christian McCaffrey last year, if you hit on a Breece Hall or a Bijan Robinson this year, that will go a long way for sure. And that's also backed up by the semifinal advance rate, which is at 1.58%, which is actually pretty strong here. But the chances that you actually hit on the right one, they're not particularly great if you're just trying to go double hero RB, because your chances drop from 16.7% before drafting all the way down to 15.3%. Now, what happens if you go running back 2 in round 2? The first 2 rounds, you decide to go with 2 running backs here. Well, it drops even more. It drops another full percent down to 14.2%. And also your semifinals advance rate, the likelihood of you advancing the semifinals actually drops a little bit as well. Drops from 1.58 to 1.32. So we're already seeing that going with 2 running backs back to back in the first 2 rounds, not a particularly great strategy. Now, let's go to round 3. What if you decide, like, after you take 2 running backs, can you rebound with a wide receiver in round 3? Because as we said earlier, getting a wide receiver is of the utmost importance in a best ball format because there's 3 wide receivers that will be scoring points for you on a weekly basis in best ball drafts. No, the chances don't really go anywhere, actually. 13.9% chance of making the playoffs if you go 2 running backs first 2 rounds and a wide receiver in round 3. This is not the way to do it. I mean, this just backs it up right here. The first 2 rounds, you cannot go 2 running backs in a row. Now, what if you flip it, right? What if you go with a running back in round 1 and a wide receiver 1 in round 2? If you remember, if you go running back 1 round 1, your chances are at 15.3% to make the playoffs in a best ball format. Now, if you go wide receiver in round 2 instead of running back in round 2, you're gonna see a marginal increased chance to make the playoffs. 15.6% chance. Very, very marginal change there. So we're already kind of seeing that going with a running back in round 1 is not always the best thing. Now, I will say the semi-final advance rate actually raises a little bit. So this is to say, if you hit on the right running back and if you hit on the right wide receiver in round 2, your chances to advance throughout the playoffs, they go up. So if you want to take that risk on, that's totally fine. I've done it myself in a couple drafts, but I primarily like to go with wide receivers early. Now let's go with a running back 2 in round 3, because that completes the double hero running back strategy here that we're looking to do. That automatically decreases your chances. You go running back 2 in round 3, you're going from 15 to 14.2% playoff advance rate right there. And your semifinals and finals advance rate also go down as well. So you have one wide receiver, the bottom line. If you have one wide receiver through the first 3 rounds of your fantasy draft, that is simply just not a good formula for success. It's not tried and true over the past several years. Now, what happens if we go wide receiver 1 in round 1, and then you pick the next 2 picks as running backs? Round 2 and 3, you go running back. Round 1, you go wide receiver. 15.5% advance rate, and actually your semifinals advance rate plummet, and your finals advance rate plummet. Everything is in the red, as you can see on the screen right now. So what we're finding out throughout this is no matter how you slice this one, your playoff advance rate shrinks completely when you go with 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds of your best ball draft right here. And of course, the reason being that wide receivers go so much earlier than running backs do in a best ball format. Let's just take a look at the draft board right now as it sits today. I'm filming this video on Monday, July 8th. So let's take a look at how things line up in an underdog draft today. As you can see, throughout the first 12 picks, there's only 4 running backs inside of the top 12, and there's 8 wide receivers inside of the top 12. So wide receivers are going at a 2-to-1 rate compared to running backs here. Then when you go down to the second round, you're looking at running back 7 off the board at pick 24, and the wide receiver 17 off the board by pick 24. Then when you look at pick 36, that's the end of the third round, you've got the wide receiver 26 off the board, and the most recent running back to go was Derrick Henry at the running back 9. There's just a lot of history and data that is showing you guys that the 2 running back strategy in the first 3 rounds, otherwise known as the double hero running back strategy, is just simply not a good idea to do in a best ball format. Now, like I said, it is also worth noting that if you go with a running back in round 1, a wide receiver in round 2, and a running back in round 3, your advance rate in the semifinals and in the finals, if you hit on the right ones, actually you're pretty decent. So if you want to try that strategy, I'm actually doing live drafts. Gonna start dropping in the code there so you guys can join the drafts as well. So if you haven't joined Underdog yet, use code FFN. They'll match your first deposit up to $100, and you'll also be able to receive $250 in bonus cash as well. So go down there in the comments below, join Underdog with the link in the description. Now, I just walked you through the issues with the double hero running back strategy. What if we just wanted to go with a hero running back strategy? Hero running back strategy, 1 running back, first 3 rounds of the draft. Let's see how much that affects things in the history of the last 2 years. So let's go wide receiver round 1, running back round 2, and wide receiver round 3. So as you can see here, every number is basically statistically more improved. You have a 16.4% chance of advancing to the playoffs. So slightly down from where you drafted, but you've still got a decent shot compared to where you started at. Your semifinals advance rate and your finals advance rate, pretty good as well. Let's say you went wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 in rounds 1 and 2, and then you went running back 1 in round 3. That's a better advance rate right there. 18.6% chance of advancing to the playoffs. If you go wide receiver 2, if you get your second wide receiver by round 2, and you take your first running back round 3, 18.6% chance of advancing to the playoffs. And your semifinals advance rate and your finals advance rate are very strong numbers as well. And finally, if you went with running back in round 1 and wide receiver in round 2 and 3, your advance rate to the playoffs was 15.1%. and you had a semifinals advance rate of 1.7 and a finals advance rate of 0.11. So again, your advance rate in the semifinals to finals, if you go with a running back in the first round, are actually relatively strong if you hit the right running back. But the problem with this data is that your chances of making it to the playoffs are low because there's typically only one guy who's going to get you that league-winning upside in the first round. Yeah, there's a couple of them in this year's draft that I actually like all of them. I've taken all of them in the first round. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall. I've even taken Jahmyr Gibbs at the back of the first as well. I think they all potentially have league-winning upside, but I understand this data shows me that the likelihood that I'll be advancing to the playoffs is automatically dropped from where I first started before I even drafted a single person. So as you can see, the earlier you take a running back in a best ball format on Underdog, the lower your chances are of making the actual playoffs in best ball drafts. Now, if you do make the playoffs, your chances of advancing are actually pretty decent right here. So it really does ultimately come down to what the risk reward is for you. Is it worth it to you to risk not being able to advance in the playoffs for the chance that you might hit the right ball in the hole and you'll advance to the semifinals and the finals if you do make the playoffs? Or do you only have one draft, two drafts that you're planning on being in best ball, where your chances to advance to the playoffs, you need to raise them as much as possible because you only have 1 to 2 drafts to do it. In my personal situation, I've drafted about 50 teams on Underdog already because there's no time commitment during the regular season. So I've done a little bit of everything. I've done double hero running back strategy. I've done the hero running back strategy. I've done zero running back strategy because I've done enough drafts to where I kind of want to spread out my chances of advancing to the playoffs and through the playoffs with all these different strategies here. But if I was only working with 1 to 2 draft opportunities, I would be staying away from a double hero running back strategy because it is just statistically unlikely that you will make it to the playoffs based on the data that we just went through today. So let me know what you think of the double hero running back strategy in the comments below and who your guy is at running back in 2024 fantasy football.